Hi guys, how's everybody feeling today?
Let's talk about an introduction, okay? Let's talk about it, okay?
That, for those of you who are wondering, is Bitch from the South remix by Mulatto, Sweetie, and Trina. It's a classic. Go and play it, stream it, support Black women. Welcome all Black women, welcome all people. Hello, Lula.
What's good?
What's good? How you feeling today? I've been looking forward to this conversation. See, folks don't even know we've been having this conversation between the two of us for a long time. We've been plotting and scheming for a while on the phone, just like, what's happening? How can I support your work? So it's super dope that, you know, God's favorite homegirl let us kind of come on here and talk publicly to the people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk on an often basis, like, also just checking in, seeing how everybody's doing, seeing how you're doing, how's your work, like how you're keeping yourself up. And, you know, I think especially in this moment right now, we just need to ask, how are you? You know what I mean? Like, just checking in with one another. I think that's super important.
How are you?
You know, my spirit feels really heavy, but I'm hopeful, you know, and I just think that we need to remain hopeful regardless of what happens. And, you know, obviously we're here on, you know, God's favorite homegirls channel, but, you know, I'm faithful, you know, and faithful means like you don't really know what's going to happen, but at the same time too, I know that God got us, you know, and he's keeping us close. So I have faith in that. And, you know, I feel like I'm a co-conspirator with God. So, you know, I'm ready to do the work.
Period. I feel like, I don't know, today I felt very, like, yesterday was really hard for me for some reason. I don't know, was it just me or was it yesterday just like a really heavy day? It just seemed like the momentum of like the whole past few days kind of came to like a head. I think folks had just kind of felt really burnt out yesterday. I know I did. But today I've been feeling a little bit more hopeful. I think partially because I get to talk to you, but then also just like seeing everyone kind of find a way to activate themselves in the way that they best know how. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen so many people, you know, posting things, creating resources, sharing resources, and finally starting to get to doing the work of like reading revolutionary Black folks who come before us and who paved the way and gave us like the blueprint. So I've been really inspired by that. Plus Obama finally showed up to the party. Obama entered the chat yesterday and that made me feel so much better too. Did you watch that, by the way?
I did watch it. You know, I always say Obama's my problematic favorite. Okay. Like, I hate to say it, but it is what it is. Like, as much as I love Obama, as much as like we feel pride around the fact that he was the first Black president, there's a lot of things that we know now, you know, that I just feel like we're problematic with his administration and the work that he did. And I know a lot of people critique him in the fact, especially Black people, thinking about the work that he did while he was president. But, you know, I love Obama. I love Michelle Obama. Like, it's just,
me too.
I love them together. But yeah, I mean, I think yesterday specifically, one thing I had a problem with, and I see that a lot of people have a problem with this, when you're talking about Black issues, it's okay to say Black people.
Yeah.
You don't have to clump us in with people of color and all of that. But I realized that a lot of people have issues with that, and he did too. So it's one thing I noted.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I noticed too. But one thing that I felt like was really good is that, you know, finally, we don't really have a lot of leaders that we can really look to, especially right now. Those people who we called our leaders, the influencers, the celebrities, even some of the politicians have really failed us greatly in this moment, not really speaking honestly to what people are looking to hear, or really people need to hear about what is happening and, you know, what can people actually do? So one thing I could appreciate about Obama is that he kind of helped bring it back to focus of just like, these are the real ways that we can, you know, take advantage of the power that we still have. You know, yes, they've stolen from us and they've taken from us, but these are the things that we can still do. And I'm so glad that someone said that, because I feel like a lot of folks have been just really curious, like, how's this all going to play out? And everyone has their doubts right now. And I'm so glad Obama was able to create some validation around some things that have been shared, but they're not as popular as, you know, burn this shit down. So people wasn't really aligning themselves with that message. But now I feel like you can do both, right? I don't know. What do you think? Do you feel like you can do both in the sense of like still, you know, holding the system accountable while also still participating in the system?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you and I both come from like almost the same school of politics or whatever, coming up as organizers and then kind of finding ourselves in this new political landscape where we're trying to speak truth to power and trying to shift this new political landscape to really include and like be inclusive to Black women, right? I think that it's important to understand that if we're interested in burning things down, we have to understand what systems are going to take its place, right?
Exactly.
And I'm all for burning things down, right? And I'm interested in what it looks like for us to have. I know one thing that we're talking about now in a way that I've never really seen or heard is us really pushing to abolish the police. And that's that I'm interested in. I don't think the call to defund the police or demilitarize the police is enough. So when I'm thinking about abolishing the police, I'm also thinking about how community policing can replace that, right?
Yeah.
The thing that we've noticed, you know, we're all on separate coasts. I'm here on the East Coast, you're on the West Coast. But one thing I notice is that community policing works. We're showing up in ways that Black people have always shown up for each other, right? Like there are free food stands. People can stop by and get water. I've saw videos online where people in their apartments are throwing down water and supplies and things like that.
As they should be, because we fighting for them too.
Right. And also like thinking about things like childcare, like women showing up for each other like we have always had. So for me, it's like, okay, I see what system could take its place, right? So when we're thinking about abolishing the police, for me and those who are thinking about burning systems down, I know it's possible because we know that we got ourselves and we can uphold ourselves.
Listen, Black people have been doing community policing since the beginning of time. The police have never really serviced our communities or really protected our communities. So a lot of people who are new to the chat, just now coming to the movement, are probably, you know, wondering, what does it mean to defund the police, demilitarize the police? Well, you know, back in the beginning when, you know, urban communities were specifically targeted during the crack era, you know, there was a lot of money targeted into the police department to militarize it and make it so, and policies as well. It wasn't just resources, there were policies put in place to allow for the aggressive tactics to be applied to the Black community in a way that was legal, the way that we see it right now. So what we're really saying, when people say defund the police, abolish the police, demilitarize the police, what that really means, for those of you who are curious, is just reallocating the hundreds of millions of dollars that go into the police force every single year and allocating those funds to things like housing, allocating those things to things like public safety, allocating those things to things like childcare, welfare, and different community programs to really reinvest in the community that has been disproportionately, you know, torn apart by the police and by this government. So for those of you who are scared to say defund the police, don't be scared to say that, because those folks, like the system that is currently in place, does not serve us and does not protect us, which is why we're marching in these streets every other month, every other year, you know, over some kind of tragedy.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about it in real time, right? So LA Mayor Eric Garcetti, he actually had funds and allocated to the LAPD by the tune of $4 billion, right?
Yeah.
But because of digital advocacy and individuals putting their foot on, quite literally on his neck, on the city council's neck, on, you know, different systems that are in place right now, they were able to redirect those funds to then talk about things like homelessness, which is running rampant in California right now.
Oh, for sure.
So for us now, like, I want individuals, especially people who are watching this live, to know that people power is real, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about harnessing people power, it means like just doing things like that, creating digital actions or on the ground actions. I know because of COVID-19, things are a bit differently where we can't, I mean, obviously Black people are taken to the streets regardless, okay? We're quite literally putting our lives on the line. Although we're disproportionately affected by the coronavirus, we're still showing up and showing out to let people know that we're going to fight for our liberties regardless.
I agree with you. So when we talk about the conversation of reparations, what does it look like? Because that now frees up several hundreds of millions of dollars to then be poured back into our communities in a way that is obviously to benefit us. What would you feel like those programs need to be? Like, I have an idea of what I feel like needs to be done, but what's your idea when people talk about reparations?
Yeah, I think it looks like resources. It looks like services to our community. But at the same time, too, now that we know that the government's willing to cut a check, you need to go ahead and cut a check to us as well. You know,
a big one.
I mean, the thing is, it's like we know that, you know, Donald Trump now is doing anything in order to be reelected. So him actually, I don't know about you, but I received something in the mail where it said, like, Donald Trump like sending out stimulus checks to individuals. He's quite literally using that as his political literature to let people know that he's behind that and that he needs to be reelected, right? But now that we know that it's possible for the government to show up for communities when they're in need, that means you can show up for us as well, right? Because at the end of the day, when we're out here right now, we're out here protesting for Breonna Taylor, we're protesting for George Floyd, we're showing up for Black lives. Right. So if we're talking about honoring Black lives and supporting Black lives, that means paying us as well. And what we're due. So for me, it looks like showing up as resources, looking like boosting up our educational system, making sure generations that are coming behind us have an opportunity to get even further than where we are right now. So for me, that's what it looks like.
I think that's absolutely on par, my friend. I think resources, economic justice, reproductive justice, educational justice, all the things that have been really, you know, watered down for us. You know what's crazy? I went driving around Inglewood the other day and I looked at the Black community. I live in Los Feliz. So for those of you who do not know about Los Angeles, Los Feliz is like the upper west side of Manhattan version of Los Angeles. And then Inglewood is kind of like your Brooklyn before it became gentrified portion, but it's all still very beautiful because obviously Los Angeles is beautiful and Black is beautiful. But I was just wondering, like, I saw like this is what they really did to us. I was in the drive-thru and I was just seeing folks who clearly were homeless, clearly didn't have an economic opportunity. I saw that in Los Feliz there are many stores to go shop at. In Inglewood there's one. So when we talk about the intentional devastation that has been placed into our communities where there's only 1 or 2 jobs available. You know what I'm saying? There's only 1 or 2 grocery stores to shop at. There's no economic opportunity. So when we think about what does it look like to reinvest these dollars back into our community, it looks like opening up the access to economic opportunities, strengthening the educational system, strengthening the housing system. And one thing I'm jealous about with New York is that New York really does kind of look out for its people in some ways. Like they have social programs in place. They could definitely be doing better, but compared to my experience in living in Brooklyn versus living in places like Atlanta and LA, there are no programs in place like there are programs in New York. But we need that same energy in all cities, not just urban cities. Black people are everywhere. Black people are in the Midwest. Black people are in the deep, deep rural South. You know, Black people are everywhere. So when I think about reparations, I think it looks like resources. I definitely think it looks like cutting a check. But I also think it looks like sharing power. You know what I'm saying? Like establishing some sense of power for Black power to have a sense of autonomy in a lot of these spaces and really all of these spaces. Yeah. I mean, I know in working in politics, that's something that was ever really shared was power. Like I never really got a chance to make real decisions. And we talked about that a little bit in our own private conversations, Lula. Do you have you shared an interesting story about how you were able to harness power in your specific spaces, and you are such a bad bitch when it comes to a lot of things. So can you teach us how that works?
Listen, I realized we just jumped in and never really even introduced ourselves, but yes.
We jumped right into it.
That's how it always is when we're talking. But like, just for people who are on this live right now. My name is 𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐬𝐢𝐨. I'm from the west side of Charlotte, and I know that might not mean much to most, but it means everything to me. But yeah, like going back to the point that you said, so back in Charlotte, we had something called the Extraordinary Events Ordinance, right? And it was just like and what it was essentially when the DNC came to Charlotte in 2012, they put it in place just for extra security measures. Obviously, we had individuals, more police force on the ground, things like that. But what I realized is that oftentimes when they do militarize the police and they up those budgets, they never then take those weapons away, right? So they stay within the police force. So that's one thing that we noticed. So then anytime after that, because they didn't rescind the ordinance, after the DNC left, it was still in place. So anytime a large group of Black people decided to gather in Charlotte, North Carolina, they called it an extraordinary event. So they had police presence, and then they also had this stop and frisk measure where they can stop Black people whenever they wanted to and check their bags and things like that. And then ultimately them being arrested, right? So Black people were being arrested at disproportionate rates, right? So then and this was for anything, CIAA, the Charlotte basketball tournament that comes every single year. This was a Panthers game, just to give you an idea of whatever they called an extraordinary event. So then anyway, what ended up happening was a couple of friends and I who were delegates to the DNC 4 years ago, we saw kind of a fracture that was happening within the Democratic Party 4 years ago with Bernie and Hillary, and we decided, okay, obviously the Democratic Party isn't as progressive as we want it to be at this current moment. So we're going to force policies and organize on the ground in Charlotte and making sure that Charlotte's the progressive place that we want it to be, right? And that starts with us. So if anybody's watching now thinking like, oh, what can I do? Yeah, you can jump in whenever you want. You can tap in and make sure you create the change you need to. So, and it was just 3 of us. And although we had a presence locally and we shown up, volunteer a part of like the local Democratic Party, that gave us more leverage to then call our elected officials. And that's one thing hopefully we could talk about in a little bit when we're talking about being able to harness power, but also to apply pressure for the right individuals and direct it to the right individuals. Because oftentimes what I notice is that we have the right asks and the right demands, but we're not asking the right person, right?
Exactly.
And listen, one thing I know for sure is that elected officials love to pass the buck, all right? They don't want to take accountability for anything. Oh, that's not in my wheelhouse. I'm not able to do that. And they say, oh, well, no, that's actually your sheriff's department. Oh, that's actually the county commissioner. That's actually your school board. I can't do that. That's the state legislator. So they don't really want to take accountability for anything. So you have to know where to direct that power, right? And making sure you're making the right ask to the right person and holding them accountable. But that starts with you and knowing what the ask is, right? So because we knew what the right ask was, we then applied pressure to the city council who could have rescinded it. But Charlotte actually is a city where there's a weak mayor system, right? So the mayor oftentimes doesn't even vote. She's a tiebreaker. So it's another thing too to understand how your local government and municipalities are set up. So it wasn't even important for us to press her on it. It was important for us to press on the city manager, who has more power than anybody who's actually on the city council. So we called him and flooded his inbox and called him constantly until he got to a point where he said, well, actually, we don't need this ordinance anymore, and we're going to rescind it. And that happened within 2.5 months.
Wow.
So, yeah, so this one thing that was affecting so many Black people in Charlotte was rescinded, and we were able to do that in 2.5 months because we knew exactly who to ask, and we had the right action plan. So when I know that it seems like change happens over a large portion of time, but change can happen very quickly if you have a plan and you know exactly what it is that you want. We need to understand what our demands are in order for them to be met.
Yeah, and that's what we see happening right now, and what's happening right here across the country with the demand to defund the police and prosecute killer cops. You know, if you want to defund the police, the people who are responsible for that, it really is layered because police forces are layered. So you have a police force that's a city-based police force, a state, a county police force, and then you have a state police force. I don't really know because Brooklyn's a bit different because they have precincts as well. But everything that happens has to happen locally. And although we've seen all of our people come together and stand together in unity and protest, the real work that these organizers are doing beyond these protests is exactly what Lou was talking about, is developing and applying pressure at a local level. And it really only takes 1 or 2 people to do that. You don't really need to have a bunch of folks, but there is so much power in numbers. But as long as you have the right target and the right information, you know, that it becomes a lot doable. But the thing is that they don't teach us these things, Lula. When we go to school and we can study, you can be a whole ass lawyer and not know how a city is ran in your city, because it's a privilege. It's information that is kept for the privilege and kept to be discreet, so that folks like ourselves are not able to properly activate when we want to see change. And that's actually counterproductive to what democracy even stands for in the first place. But for those of you who are wondering, if you're thinking about how can I begin to talk to my city about how to change some of these policies, you want to target 3 very specific people. You want to target your city council members, your mayor, and your CEO of your city, or your city manager. Now, every city has a different way in which each person plays a role. In some cities, mayors have a vote, and other cities, mayors don't. In some cities have a city manager, others have a CEO. Every city's different. So the way that you do that is you go to your city website. Every person who has a role in your city government has a public email that is available to you, as well as a bio that's available to you, and you can actually email them directly and ask to set up a meeting. These people are paid by your taxes. Your salaries pay for their lunches. So these people work for us. It's not the other way around. You know, we owe them nothing. We don't even owe them a vote if they didn't earn it. So the best way to activate these folks is to just contact them, get to know them, and let them know, hey, like, I'm really curious about how I can get better housing equity constituency and my community, are you willing to work with me on that? And 9 times out of 10, folks at a hyper local level, like your city council members, are way more accessible than your congressional members.
Absolutely.
They will absolutely meet with you for coffee. They will absolutely talk to you. And if they don't, you got to find a local reporter and let folks know, like, hey, this person is off the radar. I've reached out to them about X issue. This is not happening, and make sure it goes on the record that this person is who they are, so that when it's time to vote them out, there's something to vote them out with beyond just you being upset that they didn't respond to you. But see, no one really knows that. And how did you get involved in politics, Lula? Like, because I know for me, I didn't really know that until I started working in it. I didn't learn it in school. I didn't learn it in college, and I damn sure didn't learn it in community. So how did you learn it? How that works?
You know, it's interesting. Like, I think a lot of young individuals, especially young Black women in politics now, had a very similar introduction to politics, right? Whether it was through community organizing or through the nonprofit sector, or someone just quite literally holding your hand saying like, hey, I have this opportunity for you. It might be great for you. For me, when I graduated college, I actually was going to leave Charlotte, North Carolina and start working for a local publication up north. My uncle, I didn't want to be a statistic. Like graduating college and not having a job. And I noticed that so many of my friends and my peers were graduating and didn't have jobs ready for them, and they had so much debt. So that was one thing I was fearful of. But I started working with the League of Conservation Voters, and which is a nonprofit environmental organization across the nation. And an opportunity for me to really understand. I didn't know community organizing was a thing. Yes, like, I know everybody knows that Obama was an organizer and he made it super sexy, and everybody was like kind of like having their introduction to politics through OFA. But for me, that was my introduction, doing community work. And I didn't realize, and it was something that I realized later on in life, that so many Black women do community work, but it's not called that, right? They show up, they go to meetings, they organize the community. We don't know their names. They don't get paid for the work. They just show up, right? So I didn't realize that was community organizing, right? I didn't realize that they were already doing the work, even though I didn't have language for it. Now I know that they're community organizers and, more importantly, community leaders. But for me, I got involved with the League of Conservation Voters. After maybe 3 or 4 years of organizing, I realized that political power never really, like social issues never change without political power, right? Yeah. So I got involved with the local Democratic Party, and I kind of like just kept organizing my way up, became a state executive committee member all the way up to the DNC. I think for me, it's like I've always approached the situation thinking, how does this affect Black women? And that's kind of been my North Star up until this, very moment, where it's like, okay, I know that when Black women are lifted and empowered, it's better for humanity and better for society, and we're all better for it. So, I don't know. I feel like doing community work and being involved in politics really was just always a part of me. My parents are from Somalia, and we are, we have a culture of where it's we, not me. And I think that was kind of ingrained from an early age. And it kind of has also led me in my adult life. But I know that you had an interesting introduction to politics as well. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Obama. No, but seriously, I'm from Brooklyn. For those of you, I realize I haven't introduced myself. My name is 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐷𝐸𝐿. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and giving us your time. Yeah, for me, I was just in college, you know what I'm saying? And I just was curious. I'd always grown up pretty poor, pretty marginalized, never really understanding what power looked like. I never really had power. I never really had access to power. So when I went to college, I started college at the University of West Georgia, and found myself really infatuated with Whitley Gilbert, because Whitley Gilbert for me was the reason why I even went to school. So I joined SGA immediately, and I had to be that bitch on campus because hello, how could I not, and then in doing so, Obama was running for office, and I was tasked with the responsibility of engaging the campus into the local elections that were taking place, and really just do the work of really seeing how communities are being organized and how certain communities were being not organized. I became super passionate about becoming inclusive of Black voices and Black people, specifically in the political space. I sat down in a meeting and realized they're talking about the solutions that I desperately need right now as a college student. You know what I'm saying? And these people are over here talking about it in a way that doesn't really hit with me. But because I had done the work of really trying to understand what was going on, that is how I kind of got introduced to it. And then really from there, I just kind of got lucky. I got a lot of internships. I had to volunteer on a lot of different campaigns, and eventually you learn how to organize. But I will say, like, as a Black woman, no one gives you shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one really gives you the heads up that shit's going down. No one really takes care of you. No one tells you how to ask for a salary. So you end up doing volunteer work, because in many of these campaigns, a lot of these campaigns are ran by volunteers, and many of these volunteers are Black women. And many of these Black women have the skill set to be full-time staffers, because they don't know how to ask to be a part of a team. They don't know that these jobs actually exist. Let's talk about the fact that the Democratic Party has been carried by Black women for free. You know what I'm saying? And that is community organizing. When you're at your church and you're talking to your churchgoers or your religious community about turning out to vote, when you're at school and you're doing these things, that is community organizing. People get cut checks for that, really big checks. These political checks ain't small. And a lot of my friends and family, whenever I first started working in politics, were like, oh, you get paid for that? I'm like, absolutely. But because we've been so taken advantage of as voters, as volunteers, you know what I'm saying, as movement leaders, they think this shit is free.
Yeah.
And it's really not. So I got involved in politics. No one really gave me a heads up or a handout. I had to really work hard for it. And then when I finally found a safe space, and a space where there were Black women leading, I got a job. And I got proper training, I got proper access, and I was able to kind of build from there. But it really took Black women being in leadership to be able to really pour into me. So shout out to the 2 Black women who worked on Mayor Reed's re-election campaign in Atlanta. That gave me a real opportunity to have real power and real income in doing this work. Without them, I wouldn't even be on this phone talking to you guys today. I would still be volunteering. Yeah. So can we talk about Black women in leadership and Black women being underpaid in this space and how toxic it is? I mean, because it's crazy.
One thing I can tell you for sure is what I've learned is that everybody thinks they can talk down to Black women. It doesn't matter if you're in a professional.
Even other Black women.
Even other Black women, right? Because there's this idea that there can only be one, right? So it's almost like I've worked so hard to get to this space, I'm not going to allow you to take it from me, right?
That part.
And it's not anything personal, right? It's not like, oh, okay, Erica's in the space now, I'm going to cut her down. It's from survival. Exactly. It's from survival. It's like I'm trying to make it, and I've worked so hard, and I'm trying to hold on to the little bit that I have, and I'm fearful that you're going to take it away from me, because I know they're only going to allow one Black woman to be in this space. Mm-hmm. Like I was watching some TED Talk the other day where the woman, it was a Black woman, I can't remember her name, but she was saying how if you saw a boardroom full of 12 white men, you wouldn't think anything of it. But if you saw a boardroom of 12 Black women, you'd be like, what the hell's going on here, right?
Exactly.
So for me, I've always thought about that, where it's like, okay, how is it that how can I make more space for Black women in all the spaces that I'm in? The first real political job I had was the late Senator 𝐂𝐫𝐨𝐿, where she gave me an opportunity to run her field office in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I didn't know what I was doing. She gave me the opportunity, and I was like, oh, I'm going to rise to the occasion. And I'll never forget, I walked into the space, and there were, mind you, 2 Black men who were older than me at the time. Mind you, I was like, I want to say I was 26. And I walked into the space, and they told me, oh, we have to wait, like canvassers have to wait in the front room, right? And I laughed, and I was just like, oh, no, my name is Lula. I'm the director here. You're right? So, like, and they just looked so shook. Like they looked confused. And these are Black men when I walked into the space. And it was just kind of like, obviously it was disheartening. Later on, we built a relationship, and it was great. That's very same position. Mind you, the first role that I had in politics, I bust ass, and I did such a great job, where they started taking my deputy campaigners and my staffers and sending them to different locations in North Carolina. Like, oh, you're doing great, you don't need any help. Please tell me why they sent a young white woman from Boston to come and be my manager. Right?
That is what they do. That is what they do, girl. And that is, ooh, these white girls. See, these Amy Coopers out here are not playing, because they be trying to police our Blackness and our brilliance and getting paid to do so.
Mind you, one, she's learning from me. She's getting paid more than me. And this is my own backyard. I'm from Charlotte. The reason why I'm doing well is because this is my home, my own backyard. They will send in white women from Iowa, they will send white women in from every part of town, this country, in order to come and regulate us. And it was a learning lesson. Obviously, I was just like, okay, I understand what's happening here, but they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe the numbers, the canvassers, the volunteers, the people that I had coming in the office. But it just let me know that, okay, I'm where I'm supposed to be. Like, my ideas are valid. I'm capable of doing the work, even though they don't think I'm up for the job. And that, you know, if the Democratic Party and just in politics in general, if you're sitting here, you want to honor, you don't even honor Black women as voters, right? You don't do anything to kind of ask or demand for our vote. It's like you're just expecting it. So my thing is, it's like, what's going to happen if we start demanding things for ourselves within this political space? Like, how are we going to demand that our needs are being met? And that's something I'm taking into all the way through November. Like, how can I hold elected officials and candidates who are interested in running for office to represent me accountable? Because our vote isn't just going to be given away. And it's something that I hold very dear, especially right now in this election season.
It says, yeah, because like as a Black sister, I fear for my little brother walking down the street, and that's not something that people are talking about enough. And it's really not just, you know, there's everything you said is so loaded. I'm sorry, my brain is like wired right now thinking about, oh yeah, because I've been in situations similarly where I've been working in politics and I was killing it, and they would send a white woman to come down and really just get credit for the work that I did. They didn't really want to be able to say that it was a Black woman who did X, Y, Z and thing, and they want to be able to save face, so that way if something does go wrong, you can blame it on the Black girl, and there was a white woman in place to try to instore order. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's been so many, like, this business, like what you guys see on TV, House of Cards, that shit's real, but really it's only happening to Black women in this space. They would never dare do it to a white man. They would definitely not do it to a Black woman. I mean, I'm sorry, a white woman. You know what I'm saying? And so although people definitely struggle in this space in every place that you're in, they really do be coming for Black women in these spaces, and you can see it in the way they treat our communities. You know what I'm saying? And I think that, like, it's crazy because, like, I was in Chicago with the former press secretary for Bernie Sanders back when he was running for president, and we were just trying to cross the street because we had to greet the senator when he got there and prepped him for his rally. Do you know the Chicago PD told us we couldn't go into the building, and we had to call the campaign lawyer to come outside and escort us inside as paid campaign staffers and we literally had a huge logistical nightmare because we literally were not able to enter into the building in a timely fashion to do our jobs correctly. And that is what it's like to be a Black woman in America, but that's definitely what it's like to be a Black woman in politics. But for those of you who are looking to take on leadership right now because you're being called to action, because you see the power of community, it's like, don't be discouraged by these things, because honestly, when more of us enter into these spaces, there's more room for us to be unapologetically ourselves. You know what I'm saying? That the way that I was able to enter into a space in a very specific way was because Black women ushered me in there, and they kind of helped train me. It took a lot of work to kind of get to that point, but once I had a safe space, I was able to be in community with folks doing this work, but having access adjacent to power.
Yeah.
So Lula and I were talking about this the other day, how like sometimes you show up in these spaces and you're Black in your fullness with your wardrobe and your hair and your makeup and your sexy and your flyness. Sometimes it's not always welcome. So Lula, I would love, because you're just the flyest person ever, to kind of like share with the people like how we cannot police ourselves. Because honestly, like our talk the other day really had me rethinking the way that I show up in these spaces and stop second guessing myself. I'm someone who will water myself all the way down just to feel like I belong, just because I get intimidated by not seeing anybody like me, fly like me, hood like me, you know, joyful like me in these spaces. So Lula, that was so refreshing the other day when you kind of shared with me how you kind of have to show up in these spaces anyways because you change the way people see us in these spaces. And I would love for you to share that a little bit, because that really, really empowered me.
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you. But it took me a very long time, and I want to be very clear. I try to be as transparent as I can while on social media or just in general in my daily walk in life. Like I'm turning 33 this year, and it's taken my full 33 years.
Weird.
It's taken my whole 33 years to finally start to feel comfortable in the skin that I'm in, right? And that goes from like me like showing up in different spaces professionally. It went from me saying, I hope they receive me, I hope they like me, to me saying like, well, I hope I like them, you know? And and so for me, when I first started out, especially with, you know, in politics, there's a particular look and style that they want you to like show up in, and like they want you to look like, or, you know, respectability politics is real, right? So I quite literally remember showing up to spaces and they're like, pull your hair back, people won't receive you, they won't be able to hear your message with all that hair.
Yeah.
You know, and mind you, like in the South, I get very dark in the summertime. Okay. So they're just like looking at me like, where are you from exactly? Oh, your parents are immigrants. Like, oh, you're Muslim. Like all of these things. And mind you, I grew up in the South, right? So everything that comes to mind when you think about somebody growing up in the South, multiply that by 1,000. Okay. It's 1,000 times worse than you can imagine.
Literally.
And I know you know what I'm talking about, like, you know, being actually and living in Atlanta. But I promise you, like, I remember showing up to spaces and people telling me to pull your hair back, put on a string of pearls, wear a scarf, wear, you know, a dress that comes down to your knee, make sure your arms are covered, like all of these things. And I'm just like, wow, I have to do all of that just to not be accepted. Do you know what I mean? I'm still not accepted, you know,
right,
that I'm in. Like, so for me, it was just like, it took me a while to understand that, okay, respectability politics isn't going to save us, because they still fucking killed MLK. You know what I mean? Like, I could show up in whatever I have on, my hair looking however I have, a string on pearls, whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable, they're still going to be uncomfortable. So if you're going to be uncomfortable, I'm going to show up exactly as who I am, with my hair curly, full out, like fully blown out, like wearing what I want, showing up fly as hell. And if you're uncomfortable, that's your own problem. That's not anything that I have to deal with, because this is God, who God intended me to be. And I'm dishonoring God by not showing up in the full light that he expected me to show up in.
Exactly.
So like, I'm doing a disservice to him trying to, like, what, please his
really appeal to these white people.
Yeah.
But like, God didn't make us white. God didn't make us boring and basic. Not that saying like white people are boring and basic, but 9 times out of 10, when you walk into a room and it's a bunch of white people, what do you see? Boring and basic.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things, you know. And I know, like, you know, whenever we were like talking about this, I'm infamous for like post and delete on my own Instagram because
I tell you all the time. I tell you all the time. I call her out all the time.
I'd be like, you know, okay, I'm gonna be sexy on Monday, delete the post on Tuesday, be political on Tuesday, delete the post on Tuesday, be godly on Wednesday, delete the post on Wednesday, be hood as fuck on Thursday, delete the post on Friday, and then get back to politics. You know, like, that's kind of how I be feeling, like I can't be all those different ranges in one person. But I'm thinking, who taught me that? White people taught me that, because my Black beautiful sisters have always empowered me in every room, in every space, in every facet that is me. And, you know, I am like new to accepting that I'm allowed to be these things in these spaces and not having to apologize. And I remember when I remember when I first started working in politics, I was that Black girl who you knew had never really been anywhere, because when I say I was taking pictures with everybody, I was on my Instagram taking pictures. For those of you who've been following me for a long time, I was sharing all kinds of information that I really could be sued for sharing, but because I had never really been anywhere, I was just so excited. Like, y'all, the mayor's right here. Like, oh my God. I was like, y'all, this is a kindness person. Like, a lot of people would like appreciate that excitement and that authenticity. But then the more that I grew up and the more access I got, I started to shelter myself and really start to police myself, because I understood, whoa, I can't do that out here. And then I remember, you know, finally have an opportunity to write for a publication with a political voice, because I realized that maybe I did have one, you know, maybe I did have a political voice. And I remember explicitly working for a white feminist organization who literally told me, I wanted to write a story about Lucy Macbeth, who was running for Congress at the time. Yeah. She was being opposed by 2 white men. And I was like, why is no one giving her a national profile? So I pitched a piece to really profile her race, not in a partisan way, but just a really fact-based, you know, profile on who she was, and she was running for Congress. For those of you who do not know, Lucy Macbeth is one of the mothers of the movement and is really powerful. And you guys, I'm not going to do that work for you as your homework. If you don't know who that is, I'm going to make you Google her, because if you need to know who she is, whether she's a congresswoman or not, she's amazing. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, so I, you know, wrote the piece, pitched the piece got picked up, and I was just like, oh, this is great. Like, my employer's going to love this. And they almost fucking fired me. They were just like, I'm sorry, but you can't you can't publish this. And if you publish this, it can't be in your name. Mind you, I'm just a community organizer at this organization.
Yeah.
I am in no power decision-making ability, but because I'm a public-facing individual or, you know, advocating on behalf of this organization, they told me, they use it as a justification to say, oh, you can't publish this piece. And it was an amazing piece that I could have gotten paid. I could have really taken my journalism career to a whole new level with this publication. And I had to pull the piece. I had to say, I'm sorry, but my employer is saying that I can't push this piece. And I really ruined a relationship with an editor because they really wanted to push that piece. And that was the first time I ever realized, like, oh, you only want me to do what you want me to do. They ended up endorsing the same candidate literally 1 month before the general. Okay. And she had beat the dust off of these white men in a runoff.
Sure did.
And she beat the dust off of a white woman as a Republican opponent in her general. Yep. And this organization had the audacity to tell me that, you know, I couldn't write about this Black woman running for office. And it was at that point where I realized that's where they had me messed up at. And I left that job and I decided to kind of do my own thing. But upon leaving, I had to write a beautiful letter to the president of the organization with all staff included. Because, you know, before you lose access to your email, you got to go a little ham. And we had to just let people know, like, you know, I'm sorry, but don't ever try me like that again. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm taking these, you know, relationships and this information, and I'm going to go build Black power. And, you know, and that's exactly kind of what I've been doing. But they don't tell you about these things when they talk to you about how they're endorsing these candidates, when they talk to you about who is in the room, how to read the room. They don't tell you that they don't want you. They literally tell you what they want you to know. When you think about even like right now what's happening with Joe Biden and all the pressure that's on him to have a Black woman VP, they're not telling you why it's taken him so long to do that right thing. You know what I'm saying? They're not telling you why it's taken so long, why they only called Donna Brazile to run the DNC once Debbie had fucked that whole thing up. They don't tell you why these decisions. Black women are always called to clean up a white woman's mess. We've been doing it literally since the beginning of this country. And we're doing it now. We raised their children. You know what I'm saying? You understand? We built these businesses, we built these economies, and now here we are in the year 2020 where we're forcing ourselves to finally be recognized as the powerful forces that we are by marching into these streets and setting things on fire. And I think that for those of you who have like feelings about the whole looting situation, for those of you who may not necessarily align with some of the tactics that are being employed right now, I hope you know that those same said tactics were used in order for us to even be sitting here on this live right now. And I know that a lot of people here are probably curious around, like, now they're seeing some progress made. Now they're seeing that the 4 officers were arrested. Now they're seeing that Breonna Taylor's case today was reopened. And they're seeing that the power in numbers is really effective. But Lula, what do you think about us possibly giving these folks a bit of an action plan on how they can power map in their own spaces and continue to apply this pressure? And then maybe giving some folks some takeaways of things that they can do. Would you be down for that? Would you guys like that in the comments? Let us know.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a space to like Q&A like before we
we got like 2 questions in so far. You want to dive into those things?
Yeah, let's do that. One thing I want to say is that all politics is local, right? And I think it's important to start in your own backyard, right? It's the best way to build a foundation of understanding these political spaces. And I think that, and obviously like local politics looks different for all of us. So jump in, tap in, understanding who your elected officials are, even if you have to send an email, just saying like, hey, I'm checking in. I wanted to get to know you, introduce yourselves, show up to meetings, community forums, city council meetings, show up, even if you're introducing yourself. I think that's very important that they know you, they know your presence, they know that you care. Because one thing I know for sure is that they think these young Black people are apathetic towards community, towards politics, and it's important for us, incumbent upon us to show up in those spaces and take up space anytime that we can.
I completely and inherently agree with you. Couldn't have said it better myself. So we got a question from my homegirl Slumdot Maya. How's it going, girl? We love you. We love you, girl. How you doing? I almost want to play a song just for you. She's asking us, is it law to make the local budget public? Do they have to let the public know what the budget is before voting?
Yeah. So for instance, now I give you one particular instance. Well, long story short, they have to make it public. They have to let the people know. But beforehand and letting you know exactly what the budget is, they don't have to tell you that. They can tell you about after everything's already done and voted on. So it has to be public, but they'll let you know after the fact in most cases, right? So keeping that in mind, but it is transparent. Everyone has to know, but you'll be able to know way before November, to be honest with you. You just have to look at your actual city council and when the budget vote actually comes down, and that's different in every city.
Yeah, and I mean, and for those of you who, just to piggyback off of that a little bit, sometimes you can maybe get in a little bit of intel if you show up to like a committee meeting or to a public like city council meeting. Sometimes they will mention these things in preparation for voting for the budget. Sometimes those meetings are public, sometimes they're not. So it really just depends on your city. But if you can find out how often and on what days your city council meets, you can always try to sit in on those meetings. Most of those meetings are actually public. Sometimes the voting happens in private, but the debating on how to allocate funds, because what happens is lobbyists will show up and try to lobby for certain funds to be put into specific departments, and you as a community member can also lobby for certain budget items to be allocated specifically. So there is space for the lobbying and the requesting, but there is no space to publicly view the vote. However, on a state level, that's a little bit different. Some state governments allow for votes to be on public record and publicly viewed online. So in most like state chambers, you can go into the House, you can go into the Senate and sit in the Senate, sit in the House if you have that kind of time, and you can sit up there and you can say like, hey, like, we're going to watch how they vote on this budget. And then you have different committees within each state House or state Senate that vote specifically by issue area on budget and how it's spent in committee. So for those of you who are really looking to plug in that very specific way, you guys might be able to find public meetings via committee, state committees, via state legislatures, or local city council meetings or commissioner meetings that are public. But to Lula's point, they don't really vote in public, but what they do is they do post a voting record. So once the votes have been casted, the next day or a few days after, you can go to your legislative council. For most states and most cities, it's called like a LC office, legislative council, and you can see who voted yes and who voted no on said budget. And then you can follow up with the people who voted yes and no on whatever items you disagree with, and you can challenge them, and you can say, hey, I'm a constituent in your district. I don't really understand why you voted yes for funding for police, but did not vote yes for funding for housing. Can we set up a time to discuss that? Because I live in public housing and I'm in need of X, Y, and Z resources. I'm not sure if maybe you don't know that, but I would like to advocate for this community. Every single person who lives in that community is able to advocate. Even if you're a formerly incarcerated person who doesn't have the right to vote, even then more so, you have the right to challenge your elected officials and really organize your community to act on your behalf, because these are the things that matter. These are the powers that people don't really want us to use or take advantage of. There's another question that has come in. It says, right here, I'm trying to put it to where everybody can see it. It says, what are your thoughts on defunding the police / what's the best course of action for achieving this goal? Let's talk about it. Luna?
Listen, I have a lot of thoughts about this. Okay, so like one thing we know now, so Campaign Zero, I believe, just rolled out a new plan for mayors, I think locally and statewide. I've been reading more on it as a day. Well, they just launched it yesterday, I believe, with that whole Zoom call with Obama and Eric Holder. But for me, I personally believe we need to abolish the police. We don't need to defund the police. I mean,
yeah,
to defund and demilitarize the police are the steps we need to take in order to abolish the police. But I honestly don't believe defunding the police is where we need to be currently, right? And I understand that, for instance, now when you're thinking about the Campaign Zero plan, like it's an actual good plan, because when you think about how these elected officials and how the system's actually set up, abolishing the police right now in this moment isn't going to happen. As much as I want it to happen, as much as I think it needs to happen and how I'm hoping and praying it happens, that's not how the system's set up, right? So we need to take actionable items, and they've rolled out a very robust plan how we actively work out these measures to like pretty much bring down police violence. But for me, I think that the bigger picture needs to be abolishing the police. And you know how we do that, like what we're doing now, right? Having forums, talking to one another, creating actionable items, holding our elected officials accountable, taking to the streets, protesting, putting up our own people to run for office, and when fundraising, like all of those measures matter. And I mean, we haven't had a chance to really speak on it, but one thing I've noticed as well is that a lot of times we critique and criticize how we show up to fight. And I think that if this is an all hands on deck type of situation and we need to show up however we can, however that is to you. But for me, I think that defunding the police needs to be maybe step one, but we need to think about abolishing the police because the police have never been here to serve Black communities.
Period. Because the police as an institution, let's talk about history for a second, because it matters, and the way society and culture in which these things are created and existing absolutely matters, right? So think about the history of police. Police were created to be slave catchers. The institution itself was intended to target Black people as the enemy. And years and generationally after that, during the Jim Crow era, Black people were still the enemy. During the crack epidemic and the war on drugs and the war on Black people were still the enemy. And now fast forward, no police institution, no institution period has undone that reputational damage to Black people, Black things, and Black politics. So when you talk about a community of people who are struggling generationally, hundreds of years after hundreds of years of living in this country and still getting the same kind of brutal treatment from the police force, it is an intentional, systematic decision to make Black communities and Black things the enemy. So when you have a system that has been created and perpetrated and abused and misused to do that very same exact thing, you have to dismantle it. There is no revising. It's almost like trying to bleach a pair of jeans, right? You can try to water out the denim as much as you want to, but the denim is still going to be denim at its core. So, but I do agree that defunding the police is the first step, but definitely reimagining how do we govern these communities? Because you have to also understand, like, the years of damage and systematic oppression that has been passed down generationally, specifically into the Black community, cannot be undone in one vacuum or in one silo. There has to be a collective effort of opportunity and resources invested in these spaces. And you have to understand the Black community is sensitive. You know, we have been traumatized. So you have to, we must reimagine the way that we govern our communities, because we're not like every other community. We've been governing ourselves, unlike other people. When something goes wrong in my community, when I was growing up, I grew up in an abusive household. I didn't call the police because my stepfather had friends in the police. I called my uncles. I called my neighbors. And that was how those were my police. And for many young Black people and people across this country, that is who they also call on for help and call on for governing and for safety. So when you start thinking about these things, we have to reimagine specifically how Black people are treated in this country and hold police and really anyone in public to a higher standard on how they treat us, because it's different. There are levels. Okay, we got another question. What protective measures do you suggest if we abolish the po-po? I like that, po-po.
You know, it's so crazy. I've been reading up on how our Asian brothers and sisters have been fighting back. I don't know if you've been seeing like tactics and strategies they're using, but one thing for sure, we're still living in a pandemic. First things first. So the first thing you need to do is put on a mask when you're out here in these streets, making sure you're protected, because at the end of the day, like, yeah, we're talking about police brutality, but we are currently living through a virus, a pandemic, so we have to keep ourselves safe. But I think also when you're going out in the streets, and like we can share after this so many other things that you can do to protect yourselves, but making sure you're taking care of one another while you're out in these streets, protecting one another, showing up for each other in the ways that you can. But also, like, when I tell you, for instance, maybe 2 nights ago, CMPD, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, actually cornered in about 50 people on one block. At the top of the deck, they were shooting down tear gas. On both sides of the street, they were shooting tear gas. So, and people aren't prepared for that, right? So when I'm saying, when you're going out here in these streets to protest, you might go out there thinking that it might be your last day out here on this earth, because they're trying to take us out quite literally. And I'm not trying to scare anybody, but what I'm seeing and what I've experienced myself here in Brooklyn is that these police aren't taking any type of measures to protect us in any regard, right? So quite literally, I've seen police officers weaponize bicycles, fighting,
anything,
pushing people, batons, tear gas. It's really scary out here in these streets. So make sure that you're protecting yourself. And when you're going out here, know that you're going out to fight for your liberty, for your dignity, for one another, making sure you're protecting yourselves. But know that it's very serious out here. And like the images you see online is to be honest,
nothing
that's going to capture what's actually happening on the streets.
Absolutely. And what's happening, worse, more importantly, what's happening when people are actually arrested and taken behind bars, specifically for resisting arrest or for resisting for trying to protest the police. They are really, really terrible things happening behind bars to people who are being arrested, especially right now. Really unfair treatment, not being given opportunities to bond or bail out. And that brings us to another level of government where you need to really apply pressure to these district attorneys, because the way that we prosecute cops, the district attorney at a county level and also at a state level has the authority to prosecute cases against these police officers and really hold them accountable. They have the authority to reopen cases that have been closed and that have lacked justice. So to Lula's point, show up, not just in the streets, but show up in these offices. Show up with these emails and saying like, hey, like, I need you to prosecute these cops. This is the number of cops that my friends personally have been brutalized by in this community, and I need you to do something about it. And when they don't do something about it, tell on them. Tell on Twitter, tell to Twitter, tell to Instagram, but definitely also tell to local media, because those are the folks who can help amplify that at a higher level. Now, I know there's so much that you guys want to talk about, and there's so much that I'm sure we and Lula want to share, but we have just 1 minute, we have 1 minute left in this live. So how about we end this live the way that we started, Lula?
Yes, let's dance.
So
let's turn up.
Can we do it again? Okay, guys, so we're going to start the end this live the way we did it, with some dancing. I'm about to play my favorite song at the moment. Get your twerk outfits going, because we about to turn up in this thing. If you guys don't do nothing else before this live is over, please make sure you register to vote. Please make sure you fill out your census. Please make sure if you have a primary election happening in Georgia and many other places on June 9th, next Tuesday, make sure you show up. Early voting is happening in places like Atlanta right now. Make sure your voices is heard on these streets, but also at the box office, because we fucking them up in every direction, honey. Okay, we're not leaving nothing on the table. We literally throwing this shit off. So we're gonna let it expire, but it has to make sure you guys had clear steps. Vote, use your voice in the streets, but also in every other capacity that you can. I'm gonna turn it up. 20 seconds left.